fellows.
Yes, sir.
I just loved having you here because you know why? I'm going to find out some stuff I never knew about you.
This will be fun.
Yeah. So, and I've known you for what, like 15 years, would you say?
Anyway, Fred and I moved to Arizona in '99, and since then, Mark.
18, 19. Wow. Things go kind of quick. I didn't realize
Life is going by fast. Life is
But you
going
look
by.
exactly the same as you always
Well,
have.
praise God for
Yeah,
that.
you actually do. It's really funny. Yeah,
Thank you.
haven't changed. You're just getting better as an artist, though. I know
Well,
that.
thanks.
Yeah.
That's the objective of
No,
art.
you really are. Yeah, I mean, I'm saying that dead seriously. Your sculptures just get better and better, and
That's a compliment, Mark.
and I would say maybe of all the sculptors I have, you are the most consistent for selling. It just seems like there's always, I don't have to sell your sculptures because the sculptures sell themselves. Which
Well, that's
is,
pleasing. That's pleasing.
Which is really fun for me.
What I've noticed, maybe in the same category, you could explain this to me a little bit. I seldom come up on the secondary market.
Yeah, that tells you something, doesn't
I
it?
believe so. I believe so, but thank you.
I will tell you, one did come up on the secondary market. I had it, and I sold it within an hour, which was really...
Works?
Yeah, which was really fun.
Mark, I've often said, I'm not big on sales. That's why you're such a dear friend to me. You can do that part. I just want to produce.
Yeah.
But I've said in the past that when somebody gets into the art business and they start asking, now, what's going to be the return on my investment? I feel like the return on anybody's investment that buys my art is a daily thing, and it's every time they look at it.
That's
They
right.
get the return with the appreciation and just the feelings it emotes from them.
Yeah, that's right. I get that every day, too. There's a lot of times I'll look at your sculpture when I'm in the gallery. I mean, just not to sell or anything, just go, super cool, like the little dog with the rain, or, she ropes her own horses kind of thing, saddles her own.
Yep, right.
Yep. And it's just, that girl, who I think is you, just has an air of her that just makes you go, wow, this really feels like somebody I know or want to know.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. I think a lot of the better art, whatever art that is, I think comes from experience. Having lived that, I think you can think that you want to, you can study it, but to really get the depth of feeling, I think that comes from the artist pulling that out of their depth.
Yeah, and that's what I want to get to too, is how you got to that point. So you grew up in a family, your dad was a professional rodeo guy, right?
Correct,
I mean,
correct.
Is that all he did? I mean, could you make a living as a professional rodeo guy?
My father in 1955 set the all-time record for the most money earned as a saddle bronc rider, a world's champion
Yeah.
that year.
How much was that?
26,000.
Yeah, that was a lot. 55,
But in
though.
55, that was a pretty good income. And then since then, it's larger. My brother turned around and won the world's championship.
75,
Correct, in 75, yeah. And I'm not sure how much Jeff won, but it had gone up remarkably. But at the same time, it cost more to win the world 20 years later.
Yeah. So where did you grow up?
I grew up in northern Idaho, in Post Falls, Idaho, on a mountaintop. I mean, literally on the side of a mountain with my mom and my brother. And Daddy was usually gone rodeoing.
And he would rodeo how long was he a rodeo guy? How long did he actually do
I
it?
don't ever remember him not being. From the time I was born. He met my mother when, I think in 1945, 46.
And he
they
was
married.
rodeoing then?
Oh, yeah. And then he rodeoed. He and I won a rodeo together when I was 19 years old.
Uh-huh.
So 19, 20,
What was that?
22,
Was
25 years anyway.
Calf roping, or what was
No,
that?
Daddy was a saddle bronc
Yeah, I
rider.
know, but what you said you won them together. What was that?
Oh, I was a barrel racer.
Yeah, right.
I
I
was-
see. You both
yeah.
won, but not together. It was at the same time.
Yes,
Okay.
same rodeo.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how you would compete together.
No, you got it.
As a team, but it was yeah. No, I knew you were a barrel racer. So, so you grow up in Idaho, and it was a very isolated area. How big was the nearest town? Like, where did you go to school?
Post Falls, Idaho was probably 1,200 people at the time, and it was 25 miles on the school bus to get to school
Every day,
every day.
front and back, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So 50 miles.
50 miles round
And
trip.
so, what time would you get up in the morning to have to do that?
Oh, that's interesting. This is a sweet story, but very true and kind of rare. we lived so high up on the mountain that in the wintertime the school bus couldn't get up. And my first grade year, I went to school and Daddy was off rodeoing and Mother was home with my little brother, a year younger. And we would saddle an old mare, and I'd ride down the mountain and put the reins up over her neck, and she'd go back to the house, and my mom knew I made it to the bus.
And you were like 5 or 6 when you did it?
6.
Wow.
6. That didn't happen a lot, but the fact that it even happened, I mean, that dates me, but that was the environment that I grew up in. I remember not being able to ride on a saddle until I was 6 because they were afraid that my parents were afraid that I'd hang up.
Yeah.
So I would chase coyotes bareback in the woods. I was wild.
And when you say you would chase them, just to chase them, or were you trying to get
Oh,
rid of
no,
them?
just for the rush of trying to run them down. No.
Because where I grew up, coyotes weren't considered to be our family friend in eastern New Mexico. There's a lot of people who hunted those out because of they take sheep and cattle and
It was
stuff.
the same thing, but as a child, you're going to chase anything.
Yeah, no,
on
it's
horseback.
true. I was chasing snakes and lizards, which I still am doing and still enjoying. I saw a nice rattlesnake last night. I moved off the road. So you grew up in a really rural environment. 1,200 people is not a big town. So you knew everybody, and you grew up.
No, we didn't even go to town. We were just out there on the
But
ranch.
I mean, everybody in school you knew.
Yes,
Yeah, probably still do to some extent. Maybe.
to some extent.
Yeah, and did you spend your whole, primary, secondary
No.
there, or
My mother was from a very educated family, and my grandmother was like one of the first women to graduate from college in Wyoming.
Wow, that's a big deal.
And so when my brother and I came, we were starting our high school. My mom said, we're moving off the mountain and we're going to get into a better school district. So we were close enough to the state line between Washington and Idaho that we moved just right over the line. And my brother and I went to school in Spokane, Washington.
What did your dad think about that when she said
You
we're
know,
moving?
Honestly, my dad liked it because we had cattle up on the mountain, but he was interested in racing horses, and we bought property down the mountain, and he put in a racetrack, and it all fit for everyone.
When you say a racetrack for like
Quarter horse racing,
yeah, okay, I got it.
just like started here in Tucson.
Yeah,
So I kind of came full circle with starting with racing horses, and then coming to Arizona. It was a pleasing thing for
so
me.
you moved to Spokane, and
The
what
Valley.
and were you like in high school yet?
Just a freshman.
And what was that like to go from on top of a hill to because Spokane's a real city?
Well, yeah, but we were out in the country. I remember, this is one of the things I remember, for PE we had square dancing. And I remember the first kid that had a crush on me said, Debbie, I can always tell it's you when we do Alaman left. You have the biggest hands of any girl in the 8th grade. So it's still pretty country.
Nice.
And I still have the big hands.
Is that what you think from working on a ranch?
No,
or
I just came with big hands, and God provided for my future.
Yeah. Well, it comes in handy when you're making sculpture too.
You bet.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's
the strength of hand.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Because I see so many contemporaries or people that have gone before me that deal with really arthritic situations.
Yeah.
I'm strong in that regard.
And so at what point did you go, I'm interested in art? Do you know? Do you remember that? Was it?
Oh, I remember doing this is so far back. Interesting that you'd ask. I used to play in the clay, the bentonite, by the side of the creeks and the river, usually the creek. A lot of bentonite. It was kind of a grayish material.
I know what that looks like.
We used to pack it on horses' legs when we'd haul them to suck the heat out. Well, the bentonite you could just shape into little bowls and cups and ashtrays. Mother smoked, so I started playing with clay when I was just little bitty in the creek. But
Like 5, 6?
yeah, itty bitty. Just and my brother and I growing up way up on the mountain, it was go outside and play. It wasn't let's take them to the wide, let's take them to this, let's take them to that. It was get outside and we'll call you when it's time for dinner.
My mom had a whistle.
mother went wahoo up the valley, and we could hear it. No, that's how I was raised.
Know. Yeah, my mom had a whistle, and when it was dinner time, she'd blow the whistle, and I'd come running like a dog.
That's charming. I relate to that. I relate to that.
Yeah, and I would listen for it, like, oh, I gotta go, I can't play anymore. Yeah, because you would. At those times, you would just take off and go. When I went to first grade the first time, it was about a mile and a half. I walked by myself down a dirt road and walked to school. It was no big deal, but things have changed, clearly.
Yeah. I'm not sure it's for the better, but it's the way it is.
It is the way it is. So you are when did you really start making art? So that's when you're 5 or 6. But in high school, did you
in junior
see
high,
an aptitude at all?
In junior high, I was selling drawings of horse heads for 10 cents a piece.
Oh, well, that says something right there.
Yeah.
And were you doing it because you could make money, or you're doing it because you go, I can draw and I want to take advantage of this? Or?
I can't imagine that I was asking 10 cents for them, but I was doing it.
Yeah.
I really didn't get into sculpture until my sophomore year in college.
Yeah, but you were making art throughout high school?
I'm still in touch with my high school art teacher, and she said, I knew that you were going to go somewhere in art when you were in high school. And I said, why didn't you tell me?
Yeah.
It would have saved a lot of time.
And why do you think she said that? Or what does she say? The reason? What did she see in you? Do you know?
I don't know. It was art was easy for me. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, and you were natural.
An aptitude, apparently.
Yeah. And so, but in college, so when you graduate from Spokane, right? What year was that? Do you
66.
remember? 66. So the Vietnam War is now raging at that
yeah,
point, right?
yeah.
And that probably is affecting you as well, because you got friends and your kids that are in your high school are heading over to Vietnam, and some of them aren't coming back.
All of them. I have great stories to tell about that, which really shaped my career.
Yeah.
I went to Washington State my first year, full scholarship.
For art? Was it for art?
No, it was for political science. I love political science, politics. And did then. I was the first girl to represent the state of Washington in youth leadership for the William Randolph Hearst Corporation. And that was a big thing for me in my senior year. And that brought about a scholarship to Washington State, the Rotary, and it didn't cost that much to go to school then. But I remember that one year that I went to Washington State, I was dorm, what do they call it? The head of the dorm floor.
Right, yeah.
Leader of the pack on the dorm floor.
It's been too long, we don't remember.
Yeah. I remember nights hearing girls howl, wail, on the dorm floor. They'd just gotten word that their boyfriend had just died.
Yeah, somebody died.
Or their fiance. It was really, that was 66, 67. I mean, in the heat of it.
And did you have an opinion of the war at that point?
Well, see, in that William Randolph Hearst program, I'd gone back, I met everybody. Johnson, Hoover, everybody that was Jack Valenti, everybody that was high up.
Actually.
Wasn't he?
I had dinner with him one night.
A spicy guy.
Yeah, he was. Very interesting.
I enjoyed him. But I was, enjoyed him to the level that an 18-year-old could. To get back to those memories of Vietnam, and that year I was at Washington State, a freshman. On those 25-mile trips back and forth to school, the neighbor boy, Dick Strong, all the close neighbor kids, God, we were tight.
Yeah, because he's got to be on the bus with you for hours.
Yeah, an hour,
for years.
Twice, 2 times a day.
Yeah.
And Dick went off to Vietnam, and he was a helicopter pilot. And my freshman year, Washington State, I got a letter from Dick, and he said, "Debbie, this is scary." He said, I'm flying a helicopter, and write me. Well, in the way things are going, everybody's busy, and I'll get to it. Towards the end of my freshman year, I heard from Dick's dad, Mr. Strong, that Dick had died in a crash. And I never got over the fact that I hadn't written him a letter. So later on down the line, my first war memorial, I did a vet reading a letter. I got the letter to Dick.
Yeah, and that was a Vietnam memorial, right? That you did. It was commissioned in Washington.
Inland Pacific Vietnam Veterans Memorial. That was my first one, and I was on it.
Yeah, I bet.
I got my letter to Dick.
Well, you had skin in the game.
Yeah, that's well put.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It makes you express yourself differently than I think other people that couldn't feel that angst and pain that you have. Which you probably, it seems like you cleared some of it, but you still have some of the pain, it seems like. Yeah. I don't think we get over some of that stuff.
The neighbor girl is my age. I talked to her the other day and I said, Kate, how come you've never married? She says, because all the boys died in the war. I mean, everybody has their point being, everyone has their cross to bear in that whole situation.
Yeah.
I think, Mark, this all started, what was my take on the war?
Mm-hmm.
I had been hyped through that trip to D.C. to meet all those people that were just like heroes, gods, and everything. And then it's just kind of like riding a horse that's a little off. Something's not quite right. Look at their ears. Something isn't right. And I had that angst. And then Dick gone, and all of that. I had my apprehension about it. My brother didn't go. He was a bulldogger and messed his knee up, and we were all glad that he didn't have to go.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I remember thinking this is a confession. If my brother had gone to war, I was going to go too. We were that tight.
Yeah.
He didn't go, I didn't have to go.
Yeah.
I went on to college and Jeff went on to rodeo.
But if he had got drafted, you would have signed up.
I would have done something.
Yeah.
I remember having that feeling. That's the feeling I had.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably giving me a lot of credit for something I don't know if I would have, but we were that close.
Yeah.
My folks had divorced by then, so we were holding on.
Right. And did that affect you a great deal when they got divorced? You were out of high school at that point?
No, they divorced when my brother and I were 14 and 15.
Yeah, so that's a very tough time. That's a tough time to go through something like that.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
And how do you think that affected you, or probably still
Well,
does
it
to some
split up
extent?
our family. I mean,
Yeah.
it wasn't just mother and dad splitting up. Jeff went with dad, and I went with mom. Our family is like fair's fair, and the kids decided on that
Right.
one. But it ended. It didn't end a relationship. It ended a chapter in my life that was huge. We rodeoed together. I was 15 driving a car with a 2-horse trailer and going all over the country in the Northwest. And nobody worried about us. We just went. We'd spend the weekend, and sometimes we'd have a pickup with the camper.
Was this you, your brother, and your dad?
No, just my brother and I.
Oh, just your brother and I.
At 14 and 15.
Wow.
It was kind of every man for himself.
Yeah.
A little bit. It's never been
And
said
he
before.
and he did professional rodeo too, right? I mean, he obviously did. He won the world. What was that in 1975?
No, Jeff was. Jeff did in 75.
75.
But Dad, I grew up without a dad.
Yeah.
Because he was always rodeoing. And in the fall, we didn't have Mom for 6 weeks because she'd go to Madison Square Gardens and the Boston Gardens with Dad. Those were the big rodeos in the day. And they'd be gone. They'd leave us with the neighbors or Grandma and Grandpa or the other Grandma and Grandpa. So I was raised mostly by my mother.
And so do you think that's why your women are so strong in your sculpture? You think that's part of it?
Oh, it's interesting that you'd say that.
Yeah.
My first sculpture was called The Way of Mothers.
Yeah.
And it was going up this mountain. My mom had to drive with the two of us little kids to get in.
Yeah.
And I remember one time we only made it up a portion of the mountain, and we walked through deep snow. Her packing my brother and the groceries on one side, and me holding the side of her coat to walk in. And I did an old broodmare with the mother with 2 little kids on a horse. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, because that's an interesting thought.
Yeah.
Very true.
Yeah, because they are. I mean, you have really strong women in your sculptures, and they're throughout your resume of what you do. I know you talk about your dad, and I see, and you talk about it periodically as, because of, you clearly idolize him for what he was able to do as a.
That's what he was. That world's champion on the cover of Life magazine or Look, and then
right. But when I see your sculpture, I see a different something else.
Influence.
Yeah, I see you, and I think now I see your mom.
Probably there's really a lot of truth to that.
Yeah, especially if she was the main person when you're 14, 15, taking care of everything. Yeah. And you got along okay with her?
Oh, yeah.
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 Some kids don't.
No, no. My brother and I were raised that you respect your mom and
Yeah.
dad. It's, the old deal. Don't get in trouble at school
Yeah.
or you'll get thrashed when you get home.
Yeah.
That's how we were raised.
no, it was
What they said went.
Yeah.
And mother was you can mess up, but don't you ever lie to me.
Yeah.
If you lie, I will not know who you are.
Yeah.
To this day, if somebody has a little lie in them,
Yeah.
I don't know who they are.
Yeah, that's what my mom did the same way. I think it sticks pretty hard, that kind of stuff.
It's I think it's good foundation for living a life
Yeah.
and raising your own children.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I tried to do that with mine.
Mm-hmm.
They know, because I can always look them in the eye and go, "Ah."
Yes, yeah. My mother had the way of at the dinner table. If something wasn't working well that we were doing, or some discussion was coming up, all she had to do is look at us, and we would just slink like the
Yeah,
cartoons
yeah.
down off the edge of the table.
She didn't even have to say anything.
No.
So you go through college, and what do you get your degree? Do you finish
I
up
got a
with
BA. I got a
in-
BA in a fine art. And
So at some point you go, okay, I'm going to become an artist.
Well,
Because you got out of the political
Oh, yeah.
science. When was that?
Well, I got out after that first year
Yeah.
at Washington State, and then I got picked up by a Catholic school in Spokane, a
Yeah.
fine art Catholic school, Holy Names, Fort Wright College of the Holy Names, and they had a lot of Oriental girls that were coming in. They really had a reciprocal thing going, and it was a beautiful fine art school. In fact, the other day I found out one of my college instructors has a studio down at Bisbee. Yeah, Bisbee, down on the street in Bisbee. I mean, they've gone everywhere. Kids that went to that school, it no longer is, but it was intense.
And so that's where you ended up finishing up college?
3 years, met a nun that was a sculptress.
Uh-huh.
And the first time I saw her, she had a habit on with a welding cap. And I met her. And shortly after
quite
that,
the
they
imagery.
changed. Yeah. Shortly after that, she did lost the habit,
Yeah.
like so many did. I graduated in '70. So she impressed me, and I started doing sculpture with her. And I was lost in the sculpture studio. I loved it. I got a degree in interior design to make money.
I was going to say, that was my question. Did you do it because you go, okay, I can make because this is 1970, I can make a living as an interior designer, and I'm
Yes.
not sure I can as an artist. And so how long did you do that for a while?
I did. I had my own company, Classic Interiors. I was offered jobs in San Francisco. I like to do commercial interiors.
Oh, see, I didn't know
I like the
this.
challenge of it. I liked it. I'm number oriented. I could do the stats on everything that needed to be done for commercial work, capacities, and everything. And had some fantastic offers. After I had my firm for a while, I did a couple of hotels in the Spokane area.
Wow, how long did you do that?
Redecorate. About 4 years is
Yeah.
all. Just 4. I apprenticed my last year in college at Fort Wright, and just kind of piddled around with sculpture. Just liked it, and I got into the interior design, and I'd sit in the office and watch the horse trailers go by. It's like something was pulling me,
Missing
and
you.
and so I let go of the affluent side of what I could have probably made an awful lot of money.
And where were you doing this? Where were you?
Spokane.
Yes, yeah.
And then I worked for a firm in Seattle, and I designed furniture. I was always creating, designed furniture
That's
for.
like sculpture, really.
Oh, it is, yeah. Well, so is interiors.
Yeah. Oh, of
You
course.
sculpt this room, and your focal point,
Yeah,
and your
no, that's right.
tensions, and the flow, and it's all
Yeah,
there.
it's three-dimensionality, which is what sculpture is, for sure.
Man, you're nice to visit with, Mark. You get the subtleties of everything
Oh,
that
yeah.
happened. I appreciate you.
Yeah, no, I mean...
So anyway, I was designing furniture for ski areas, and then designing helping architects design the building, but had my input on interior so that those spaces were doable and livable. And then I did the furniture, so that was really a lot of fun. And then, like I said, the draw of the wild got me again. It was 1975, the year my brother won the world, and he said to me, "Let's go to the winter rodeos." And I had gotten a horse by then, a good horse. I'd spent a lot of money on him, and he was a good barrel horse. And Jeff and I headed out Denver, Fort Worth, Houston, Tucson. That it's every year it's the same bunch of the same rodeos
And
Daddy
so he
went
was doing
to.
his thing, and you were doing your thing.
Yeah, and that year in '75, he said, "Come on, sis."
Yeah,
He could see I wasn't
yeah.
that happy, and he was. I helped get 50 head of calves so he could really practice and be good for his run.
Uh-huh.
And I had a good horse, so we were going to go down the road. Well, we made it through Denver, no money. Made it to Fort Worth, no money. Houston, we were just about out of loot.
Uh-huh.
And it's the last go round at Houston. We ducked off to go to Lake Charles, Louisiana to maybe get a little money, won on the side, won just a little bit. Came back to Houston, and Jeff said to me, "Debbie, I think we've got enough money for you to make it to Chandler, Arizona." Tex Earnhardt lived there, and he was a good friend of Jeff's. He said, "You get to Chandler, Arizona with the 2 horses, and I'll get there as soon as this last go-round's over." I left, came out here. Jeff won the last go-round at Houston and went on from there to win the world that year.
That was his turning point.
For him,
Yes.
but this is what's so beautiful. I went to Tex Earnhardt's house, Tex and Pam, and got in the car and drove up to Prescott. Met Ernie Phippen, met Bill Nebeker. Bill Owen walked in and went through the foundry, the whole foundry deal. Jeff and I went back to the Northwest. I went up and came back to Arizona to start casting. And that's when I started my art
So
career.
something flipped on that trip.
Yeah,
And what was it that
being
that made you do that?
broke.
But
We got broke.
how did you meet these guys? How did you meet the Nebekers, and how did that happen?
Because I went to the Phippen Art Foundry. Ernie Phippen.
you just said, "I'm going to go
George-
up and check it out."
Well, I graduated in sculpture and I liked it.
Right.
And I've
Oh, I
always
see.
been that little deal.
So you wanted to. Something was gnawing
I had
at
the
you.
sculpture degree, and I think my mom kept saying, "Boy, don't pass up on your talent in sculpture." So when we made the run and were broke, I wasn't going to make it barrel racing,
Yeah.
and I wasn't ready to go back to interior design. So I checked out an art gallery or the art foundry, and that summer I cast my first. I came back to Arizona,
Yeah.
became a head wrangler of a dude ranch in Prescott.
You're like 26, right?
Yeah, and I started casting my art there.
You
at
started
Phippen.
You started making at that point. You're a sculptor. You said, "Okay, I'm going to do this." And what did
The
you do?
commitment was
Yeah,
made.
and what did you do at the Dude Ranch? That was just so you could have some money coming in.
Oh yeah, I could always ride, and I could give riding lessons. And
Yeah.
I
And that was in Prescott.
at Hidden Valley Ranch.
And you had a foundry there, and was that the main reason? Because the foundry was there. That's why you went there.
Pretty
Or-
much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
And I liked Arizona then.
and you were single at this point.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I liked Arizona.
Yeah.
I really liked Arizona. But you know what's not to like about Prescott, because it was a crossover between
Yes.
Idaho
Yeah.
and the warm side of the world.
Yeah, I was going to say in better weather. Yeah.
Mm-hmm,
And so, how long did you work at the Dude Ranch?
Oh, just that one summer. Just the one summer.
Was that enough to get you enough?
I was
money
on
to-
my way.
Yeah, you were on your way at that very point.
And then I went back. I got married for about 3 months. And it was just a situation that I'd made a. It doesn't take me long to tell if I've made a mistake
Yeah.
or not, and I'm not going to write it out if it's
Yeah.
really
and you were
bad.
young, right? You're 26, 27? somewhere in there?
27.
Yeah.
And I was married 3 months, and this isn't going to work, and went back to Spokane, and Bing Crosby died. Now, I hadn't done a lot of sculptures, but I went into Gonzaga University, went to the vice president of Gonzaga and said, I can do a sculpture. I'd like to do a monument of Bing Crosby, because I'd heard about him all my life.
Yeah,
He's
sure.
from Spokane.
And why did you go back to Spokane when you got the divorce? Do you know? Was it-
Home,
yeah, your mom.
home,
Yeah.
came home.
Yeah.
And honestly, I kind of had my tail tucked between my legs because I'd had a big wedding.
Yeah. That's
And
hard.
it was pretty well known, and man, I just wanted to slink off.
Yeah, it felt like a
You
failure.
know,
or something.
totally. So I just kind of moved back to Mom's house and went upstairs and got a little studio. My little bedroom studio was
Yeah.
working in there after all these things I'd done with designs and everything.
Right.
But I think God works with you in strange ways. I kind of needed to be at a place where I was very needy to kick it into something that made me dig deep. That's pretty heavy. I don't know that I'd even thought about that before, but
I'm sure it's true, though.
I went to Gonzaga, and I talked to this 80-some-year-old vice president of the school, and I said, Father Dussault, I can do a sculpture of him. And I remember he patted me on the head and he said, I believe you can, young lady. I believe you can. And I was off and running it took me about 1.5 years to do it.
Yeah, that's 77, 78 kind of time.
79, that was done, I think, was when it was finished. But Mark, this is the beautiful thing. This is the beautiful thing. When I got the Crosby done, they had a mold maker come out from Queens, New York, and it was Cesar Contini. And Cesar Contini was the mold maker for Schiavos that had Roman bronze. So I went back to Roman bronze to check it out.
That was in New York?
Yeah, Queens, New York.
Right.
Queens, New York. I went back to Queens to check out to see how the casting came out. And Phil Schiavo, which was the son or the grandson of the Schiavos that had it for years, the Frasers, the Remington, the Russells,
I know.
their facility was the old Tiffany foundry. Roman bronze was.
Yeah.
I'm probably telling you something you already know. Anyway, that building was the old Tiffany, and then Schiavos got it and turned it into Roman bronze. And Phil took me downstairs, and we walked on the old boards that are like 18 to 20 inches wide and long, the planks, on wood in the basement of the old foundry. And there were plaster molds of Frasers and Russells and Remingtons. And I was in the bed of the masters.
Right.
I was walking through what their hands had been on.
Yeah.
And I've always thought that trip, there was a reason. There was a major reason for that trip, because here I was that young, wanting to do larger work.
And you were aware, because you had a degree in sculpture, who these
yeah,
individuals
yeah,
were
yeah.
and what Roman bronze was.
So it was just a blessing
And
to
so
do
did
that.
you watch them pour and do the whole thing?
Oh, yeah.
And what did that feel like when you saw it come to life? Because you basically got that of your own initiative, that sculpture. What was that like when you actually
I was
saw
actually ahead of my abilities, but I was pressing it, man. I
Yeah.
was working it as hard as I could. I have to say, every artist that's had a great opportunity wishes you have what you have now,
Yeah, right.
to have given it then. But I limped through it.
Yeah.
It's still doable.
And was this a full-size
Oh,
Bing
yeah, it was
Crosby?
1 in 10.
Oh, bigger, yeah. Wow.
9 foot. It's in front of the Crosby Library right now on the Gonzaga campus. But my senior year in college, I'd been commissioned to do a bas-relief of the father of Spokane. So I had a little bit of confidence in my pack. So I did the Bing Crosby, and I was ready to roll and still doing my Kay Reardon that had Mount Rushmore invited me out about that same year on Mother's Day weekend with kind of these the mother things that I'd done, the female things that I'd done. An interesting thing, I do not want to forget this because it's meaningful to me, is my brother came to me in Spokane when I was still in college, and he said, Debbie, I'm going to try to work the rodeo in Puyallup, Washington, and Kalispell, Montana, halfway in the middle of Spokane. Could you drive for me over to Kalispell and back, and then I'll be fine. He said, I want you to meet somebody in Montana, Fred Fellows. He's the president of the Cowboy Artists of America. And I knew a little bit about it, that it was significant, that the organization was significant. Right. Not anything about Fred, but the fact that he'd been president. So I met Fred.
What year was this?
75, the fall of 75, 76. So when I got the Bing Crosby project, I called Fred Fellows to write me a recommendation. And Ace Powell, you know who Ace Powell is? Ace and Fred wrote me recommendations because after I moved back to Washington, I started casting in Montana. And Fred watched over my work on some of my pieces. So that's the segue of my life now. how it rolled out from Spokane.
So they gave you Ace Powell and
Ace,
Brad
this is the recommendation. I just looked at it yesterday.
To get the
Bing Crosby.
Bing Crosby.
Ace said, she'll do what she says she can. That was it. That was it. She'll do what
did
she
Fred
says
write?
she can.
Do you know? Remember?
That for my talent. Now I'd studied my last year in Italy and studied a lot of monuments in Europe with this nun with the habit and the welding cap. I knew where I wanted to go. I wasn't intimidated with pursuing larger works. And Fred made some comment about that my technical ability was there, and just she can do it. It was I still have it.
Well, you're competing as a woman in a man's world too, right? Wouldn't you? Is that a true statement? I mean, this is 75, whatever, to 79.
True.
Yeah. And how did you overcome that? What was it that gave?
Well, the first thing it did, I signed it D. Copenhaver.
Well, that's important to know.
I
And you
signed
did
it
that.
D.
You did
Copenhaver.
that because you realized what was your hurdles. Yeah.
And
interesting.
I've dealt with them all the way through to
Yeah.
now.
Has it changed from then to now, or is there still hurdles?
Well, let me give you a scenario, an intimate scenario. Eddie Basha, a dear friend of Fred's and mine, a great wit.
He did.
And he had a great sense of humor, but he would catch you with his humor because he knew so stinking much about you that you'd be like a fish hooked and you're just following him,
Right.
going down until all of a sudden he says, "Hey, this is a joke."
Right.
And then you're mad.
Yeah, he used to call me and try to say, "Doctor, I think you've prescribed some medicine that isn't good, and I'm ill, and I may have to see my lawyer." And I'd be like, "Eddie."
I got to where I was like that. In fact, I turned, that's another story. Eddie called the house once and he said, "Hey, I need to speak with," and he changes his voice. And he said, "I need to speak to D. Copenhaver." And I said, "You're speaking to her?" "Oh my God, you're a woman. I like the art, but I'm not buying any art from a woman." I mean, and finally I just said, "Well, you have to do what you have to do." I was being real cool. And he knew he had me hot.
Yeah, that's funny.
And then after he had done his little deal, and I said, "Well, listen, Eddie, I got to tell you, I am a little sensitive in that department. Last month, Mary Vaughn, that works for you, said she could sell a lot more of my art if I weren't female." And he says, "Oh, damn, I'm sorry." And I found it, the apology he sent me. He wrote it on his paper, and he said, I apologize."
Yeah, isn't that something?
He was sensitive. I mean,
oh yeah, for sure.
definitely
That's interesting.
that he wrote me an apology. So you ask how current?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's ongoing, and people like to play with it, just like they have to like to play with Fred and I, two artists in a house. People like to dig under and try to create issues.
Funny, I use it as an advantage.
Yes, the two in the house.
Well,
Amen. It's four eyes.
Yeah, and also that you're a woman, that you understand, I think, the subject matter of what you're doing better than anyone could. And it's an advantage that you're a female making sculpture, that it's a small world.
That's a quiet truth I've had for many years, but I felt that it was arrogant if I expressed it, Mark.
Yeah, no, but it is true. Yeah, it's so funny how people see it. I think this generation coming is going to see it differently too.
I agree.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to see male versus female or whatever. As far as it never mattered to me as far as an artist. I didn't care. It was what they could do.
That's what I've leaned on. The truth will out.
Yeah.
The truth will out. Who's going to be in there at the last chapter? So I'm fine. I've liked the ride. The ride's good.
Yeah.
It's still good.
Yeah.
I don't see an end in sight. Physically, I feel fine. I still have the desire to grow, move on.
All good artists do that, by the way.
Yeah, I think it has to be a part of you,
Yeah.
or you're not quote artist.
You're competing with yourself. You want to get better.
Well, I see artists that try to get it's kind of like that Gypsy Rose Lee. You got to have a gimmick. They're looking for a gimmick to be known for.
Right.
The gimmick's good for a while.
Yeah.
You can ride the gimmick out for a while, but eventually, like Fred says, the art that's the true art is the art that's appreciated by the largest number of people over the longest period of time.
Yeah.
And I believe that's really the truth. So if you feel confident with what you do, stay in there and just ride it out.
Yeah, I look and see if they have legs. That's what I call it.
That's a great line.
Yeah, are you going to have legs over the long time? And if you do, that's the guys I want or girls I want. You know, yeah, I don't like isms like Dixon. He didn't like isms. He wanted you to follow it from the heart. You got to follow it from the heart. So you meet Fred Fellows to get a letter, but
No, I met him, and then
Yeah.
then I contacted him
gonna
and
say,
said, write me a.
at some point in time that flipped to something else. When did that happen?
Well, when I met Fred, he had 4 kids at home, and his wife was wonderful, and I was doing some interior design, and she started a business, and there was some communication there. But it was 12 years later she died of cancer, and I had gone through that miserable divorce.
Yeah.
And it was just like she died in October, and in February, Fred had gone to Hawaii to grieve and vent, and I had heard that she had passed. When I heard she was at the end stage of her life, my brother that was the calf roper turned into a pastor.
Oh, well,
One of the first Christian athletes program. And he's a pastor at the time. And when I heard Jackie was gravely ill, I said, would you like me to have Jeff come and lay hands on her and just spend time with her? And he said, thank you, Debbie, but we've got that covered.
Yeah.
Everybody here's on it. But thank you for being in touch. And then she died. And then in February, I had called him around Christmas, and I had contemplated going to Montana, and he was in Hawaii, and he says, you can stay at my place. It's yours. I'm gone.
in Montana.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I didn't.
Yeah.
I waited until he asked me to come over, and then we dated February and married in May.
And how old were you at that time? Or what year was it?
We married we married in 1990.
Yeah.
So I'd been married in between this time for 3 years and had a baby girl.
Yeah. Yeah.
Got the prize. And was married for 2 years to her dad, and 3 years, and then we divorced.
Yeah.
And so I had pretty much wrapped it up on ever expecting to marry again. It just wasn't it wasn't going to be in my game.
Yeah.
But I had a beautiful, lovely daughter.
Yeah.
And I had a home with a few head of horses and a indoor swimming pool. I mean, I was doing fine.
This?
Spokane. I was back in Spokane. And
making art all that time.
Oh, yeah, totally. I had done quite a few monuments. The Montana Vietnam veteran, the Korean War Memorial, and the first Korean War Memorial in the state of Washington. And I was on a roll doing monuments, Benny Binion for Las Vegas. So I was locked in. And I was fine.
Yeah, and you enjoyed it.
Yes, immensely.
Yeah.
And then Fred invited me to come over, and that changed it all. It all. Shortly after that, we were married in May, and Fabi grew up in Montana, and it's been 28 beautiful years.
I was going to say, that was 28 years ago.
28 beautiful years.
And how did that relationship change, if it did? It may not have, but how did it change the way you saw sculpture or what you were doing? Because he was an active sculptor at that point.
He did his first monument 2 years after we got married.
So maybe it changed him. Yeah, right?
I kind of challenged him in that regard because he wasn't really wanting to do it. And I said, but you're the president.
Yeah.
The CA is moving into the Cowboy Artist. You're the president this year. The Cowboy Artist is moving into the Phoenix Museum, is in a new facility. It's never been done. The stars are crossed.
Right.
Why don't you go for it? So I got enough champagne into him that he shook, and when he shakes, it's a deal. Yeah. So he did it.
So he did. And where's that monument?
That's Ruger. Mr. Ruger was still alive.
And what was the image of it?
It was a bucking horse.
Is that the one that's in front of the booth as well? The same? Don't they have?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. The Booth Museum, for those who don't know, is in Cartersville, Georgia, which is right outside of Atlanta, and you have to go because it's fantastic.
It is.
Yeah, it's amazing. In fact, Seth, if you're out there listening, he's the director out there. You better get in Tucson because I want to interview you too.
Well, that would be a wonderful thing. Seth is wonderful.
He interviews everybody else. It's time for him to get interviewed.
Speaking of the booth, they purchased the Praying Cowboy monument that I had, and they put it on the booth grounds, which was an old church that was there, the foundation. And that sculpture they put on the foundation of that little church
that's
in Carter.
interesting.
Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah, that's fantastic.
It's
This is a big sculpture you did that was an homage to your father, right? Kind of. Yeah.
Yes, probably a little bit. I remember he was a rodeo arena director, and they'd do the national anthem and the prayer, and Daddy would always be horseback and with his head down. And I just thought that's just a beautiful.
Yeah, it is.
And Daddy's still alive. He's 93, so
Wow, good for him.
still riding in parades and stuff.
He does still ride? Wow.
So I might sculpt till I'm 93, Mark. Hang on.
Huh? Good. I'll be there with you. I can hang. I don't plan on retiring.
Yeah.
So you get married to Fred in 1990, and what happens to where is your career from there to now? Because a lot of things have changed. A lot of things have. I mean, your career continues just to grow and grow and grow.
Well,
and you're in Montana at this point.
Yeah. We were 10 years in Montana, and then we came down here. I need to finish that question you asked me. How did that change the dynamics
I'd like
of
to know
my? That was kind of tongue in cheek with Fred doing the monument.
Yeah.
But I think it was good for me to be around a painter, to see, just to observe how he lays things out. And it was such fertile ground to see the artists that I was in touch with, and a lot of them were sculptors and the cowboy artists, the shows. It broadened my scope finally out of Spokane. It was open. I had studied more and been more in Europe than I knew what was going on in the United States. And the Cowboy Artists of America was a beautiful opening to, at the time there were some good artists. They're great artists now, I think, that are coming out of it as well. It was saturation, art saturation.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah,
and it was just
talking,
both of us.
Art at all times, right? Like,
Well, the interesting thing about
your
living
studios
with
are
Fred.
close together, at least in Sonoyta.
Yeah. Now we're together. For the first year, Fred built me a beautiful studio when we got married. I could either be on a lot next to the house or be adjacent to the house. And I opted to be adjacent to the house because Fabienne was 7. And she could be there by the lake. I didn't have to worry about her, but it had pretty skylights or kind of an atrium look out onto the water. And I worked in the basement, and he worked in his studio in the house. Our working together is just, you get up in the morning, you do your chores with animals and whatever, and then you get into whatever it is you're working on. Fred is studies. He reads, he studies. He is the Renaissance man of my life. He knows about everything. You could ask him about a Porsche or a Mercedes or what's in the engine this year, or airplanes. He was an art director. You've heard of Northrop. He knows planes.
There's an analytical quality to him, no doubt.
And that's healthy. And diverse interests is good. I think you can get too tunnel, whatever the word is, on what you're doing, and you can lose some of the freshness of your art. And to have that input.
He's curious.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is part of it.
Yeah, and he collects all sorts of stuff.
Everything.
We didn't even go into it, but I mean, his knowledge of Mexican saddles and accoutrements and all that is, guns.
And those all have come into play.
Yeah.
When I did the last year, the Bowie, Jim Bowie, my husband's one of the head guys in the Bowie Society in the United States. There was no question about what the knife was going to be like. I mean, Fred was checking it out.
Yeah.
Or the guns. I've been asked to do Parker for the Parker Ranch on the Big Island of Hawaii.
Yes.
Fred's already got the gun set in the studio, and we know the Catahoula dogs are next door. It's just the opening up of a lifetime of interests are funneling together, and it's beautiful.
Do you think
fun.
that made that, because Fred is so careful about making sure everything is correct on his sculptures and his paintings, that bled over to you, to what you do, that you make sure, okay, I know your way around a horse and all that, but do you think those little details made you, did you find that you wanted to use those in your sculpture more?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Without a
I
doubt,
would
the
think that way.
accuracy of what goes into a piece
Yeah.
is significant. There's not one thing that I've done since I've married Fred that I wouldn't stand up to.
Yeah.
The test of time. Those cinches are right. They're hair cinches. They're the right date on the saddle. The 1883 Trail of Dreams. She's looking over the Rockies. It's locked in.
Well, you know Fred's behind you somewhere is going to look when you're done, too. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. And, you know, I think that happens to artists when they're together, that they influence each other, like Maynard Dixon and Dorothea Lange, no doubt had Dixon first influenced her, and at the end, she influenced him. And, you know, right now you've been more an active artist, I think, to some extent, maybe than Fred. I mean, you're really producing some great stuff. And one of the things I wanted to make sure we talk about is the Goldwater sculpture, because not everybody has a sculpture in the rotunda at the White House, but just so happens that you do.
I'm very, very happy with that.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that, because that's really an impressive thing that you have something like that.
The state of Arizona had a competition, and I entered it. In fact, Mrs. Sublette called me. I was at a trail ride.
She didn't go by that. She goes by Dr. Cudahy, but that's okay.
I'm just doing this to you.
Yeah.
She called me, and we were at a trail ride in Montana. I don't even know if you knew this. And I was out shopping with the CA wives, and I get this call from Kathleen. She says, "Deborah, something just came up. You have to do this.
Yeah.
You have to do this." And I said, "Well, sounds good to me." And I came home and fired on it.
Yeah, I remember Kathleen saying,
Kathleen just...
"Oh, this is just up her alley. This is perfect for her. She
called right then.
Yeah.
So I came home and got started on it, and it was there were a lot of artists.
Oh, I'm sure.
Buswell. I mean, there was a number of artists, and I thought, wow, I've done big ones before. This is portraiture. This is really locking it down. This is going to require, and I'll be darned if I didn't make the cut on the first 5.
Yeah.
Then they said, do a bust.
Yeah.
And I went to work on the bust, and boy, I poured my soul in it. And I've got the bust in the studio right now. He almost talks to me. He had light colored eyes.
Yeah.
I sculpted gray eyes. Come to the studio, Mark, you and
Yeah,
Kathleen.
I
I'd like
will.
you to see it in the clay. I was very happy with that. And I guess if there was a crowning piece, I would say it's that at this point.
Yeah.
For the longevity, people in Texas would say the Bowie.
Yeah.
Bruce Green.
Got legs.
Yeah. Bruce Green said the happiest time in his life is when he did Dickinson for the walk in Texas, and so now I've got Bowie in front of the Alamo. It'll be up here pretty soon.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, I'm excited about that.
Yeah, you should be. So when you do something like that, like Goldwater, how deep do you go to try to get the sense of what this guy is?
Oh.
Is it not only looking at photographs and film or whatever, but also reading about
Every
him?
book you can get your hands on, there's no boundaries.
Yeah.
You're only limited by what you don't have.
Was there one little thing that made him, in other words, something that he did, the way he stood or the way he looked or the way he would wear something, his glass or whatever?
I talked to everyone that I could think of. And when people found out I was doing them, they were just so helpful to just say, oh man, I remember when he had a pack string from Payson to Flag, and just some of the things he did, that he was a man's man. And boy, he was the kind of man that's attractive to me. I really had I had a relationship through this whole thing.
Yeah.
And I couldn't let down my relationship with him. That sounds kinky, but I did the same thing with Crosby. I started dreaming about him.
Yeah, I understand that.
You're so focused that pretty soon you're riding out that individual, I don't know that expression, I don't know what anybody would get, but you're living that space that you're trying to create.
That's what actors do, right? That is what
I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what they do.
I dreamt. I
They
had
get
real
into that character. They get into that person because that's the only way they can really, get to the place that they need to be. And you're
Mark,
doing
I
what
talk
that
to
is.
them in my dreams.
No, I believe that.
I mean, it's a dream that I'm
Yeah.
conversing with them.
That's your subconscious trying to work out what you need to do in a three-dimensional.
There's the answer to the
Yeah,
question.
yeah.
That's how far it goes.
Yeah.
And it's only happened because I was so long working on the Bing Crosby, but a portrait, that's a different cat.
Yeah.
And then the
More
Barry
responsibility too. I
Totally.
think. Yeah.
Oh, the heat. That's
Yeah.
heat.
Yeah.
That's the real heat. I talked to the family, read the books, saw the videos. The people that would come in and personally say, "Oh, I remember him speaking at ASU," and it was a wonderful time to share him. And the touching thing, it was his granddaughter had not seen it. Michael and Barry Jr. came to the studio. Barry came quite a few times, and I met.
That has to be
Bush.
pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the
real
committee
pressure.
came.
Yeah.
They were on it. Then going back and forth to the photographs to the curator of the Capitol. I will say that I can't remember her last name. I apologize about this, but she said, "I'm delighted that a woman's getting a piece in the rotunda
Yeah. How
or
many?
in the statuary hall."
Yeah. I wonder how many women sculptors have done that.
I don't know, but not a lot.
Yeah. I bet.
Anyway, that was one thing that came up, which I thought was interesting. I didn't want anybody, but that isn't why I got elected here. Was because of the woman thing, but it was just
Because
an
you're
appreciation.
extremely good artist. I can tell you why you got it.
Well,
I've
thanks.
seen that, and I've seen the sculpture, and it looks fantastic.
The fun thing about that particular one was I could put him in boots.
Yeah.
There's not another one in boots there, and they're not the typical cowboy boots, but he was from a haberdasher type upbringing, and he
Yeah.
was very proper and very tailored, but he was the head of the Bolo Tie Society for
didn't know
years.
that.
And oh yeah,
I don't know.
his collections up at the Herd.
Yeah.
I mean, he was the daddy of the bolo tie, so that's why he has the Thunderbird on. Now this is the really acute one in this whole thing. I was digging around. I went back to Washington, D.C. There's a lot of story to this. I've made a few trips back there, but I was digging through the pictures of him, and he was gesturing with this hand, and he has a smoke eye tattoo on this hand. In this gesture, I said, "What is this?" I came home and I called the family and I said, what was that? They said, "Oh, Dad had a tattoo." He went to all of the dances, there's an expression
Like
for
the
it,
powwow
ceremony,
dances,
the
yeah.
ceremony, the powwows. And each time it's a half moon and then the dots that go underneath it for however many times you attended. And so it was at the last hour that I saw that. I came home and I put that tattoo in this hand, that just this portion of his hand is out. And he's the only sculpture in Statuary Hall with the tattoo. And the Japanese, the Germans, everybody in the country, the docents say to me, they all like to go over and look at his tattoo.
Oh, that's crazy. That's fantastic.
He has that tattoo
Yeah.
anyway, and he has his bolo. And
Well, that shows you how committed he was to Native American arts too.
well, the books of his photography were revealing to me. They said that there were people that would be ill on the res, and he'd fly in, being the pilot that he was. He'd take them supplies and medical needs.
Because that's part of being an Arizonian. You know, if you're from New Mexico, Arizona, Idaho, or Montana, I mean, native populations, Indian culture is an important part of your, being. I had no idea about that. So
The rest of the story.
Yeah, so, that's fantastic. I wish I'd have known it when I saw the sculpture. I would have gone and looked at it. But so what was it like for you to go to Washington, D.C., that first moment when you saw your sculpture in that rotunda?
Tearful.
Yeah?
When they pulled the veil off.
Yeah.
It was just to see it just masked, with the big veil on it, and everybody was talking, and it was a lot of hype and the echoes. I remember, sensory things like the echoes on the halls of the marble and the sounds of people and the flashing of the cameras and it's going to be uncovered in a minute. And I do remember this, Mark. I just said, "Oh God, if I missed anything, would you take care of it now?" I was just praying to God that it was what I wanted, what I hoped it would be.
Yeah.
And that came off. And everybody took a deep breath. And the sweetest thing that happened that day is the granddaughter of Barry Goldwater, and he was very close to her. She was quite young.
Uh-huh.
She went up, walked up in front of everybody, and looked up at it and just sobbed, just cried.
Yeah, you got it.
She said,
So that
"That's
was worth
Papa."
it. Yeah, that
That's
was worth
Papa.
it.
Yeah.
The whole thing,
Uh-huh.
just that to me seems like as an
There's
artist,
the one.
that would be, yeah.
That's Papa.
Yeah, wow.
And that was the thing I remembered the most because the others had seen it. But she had nothing to say.
That's hard to top as an artist,
Yeah,
I would think.
that's heavy. I don't think I've told anybody that.
Now you're telling
out.
the world. Yeah, that's good.
out.
It should be. That's why
It's
I want to
out.
do this show. That's why I want to interview people, is to
Mm-hmm,
find out these things are important. That should be played 100 years from now when they're showing it, right?
Yeah, I have to say something, Mark, that happens on these monuments. It happened on the Binion that I did for Las Vegas, Benny Binion. He was a mentor of mine, this gambler that has the
Right.
Binion Casino.
Yeah.
And then I did a bust of Father Dussault, but you work so hard and you go through this time in your life and it's all a part of you and you're just so into it. And then there's one day when there's nothing more you can do. You wish there was something more you could do.
Uh-huh.
And you pull on it and there's nothing more to do. As hard as you try, you'd be going backwards if you worked on it anymore.
Right.
That's a delicate balance,
I think that's
to know
for
when to
every
quit.
artist. Every artist has this, that I've talked to really kind of has this
Well,
conundrum.
If it's right, if it's done, and it happened to me on the Binion the first time, and that was like 12 feet tall.
Mm.
I was done. I'm always by myself at that time.
Mm-hmm.
When it's finally done, I'm working late or it's dark, and I've got my lights on to see how it reads in the light. And I signed it. That's the big deal.
Is that the last thing? Is that
That's
when
the
it's
last
done?
thing. I don't put my name on it until I'm ready to walk out of the studio.
Yeah.
So I signed the Binion, and I walked out of the studio. And I thought, I got to take one last look. I opened the door,
Yeah.
flipped on the light,
Yeah.
and it wasn't mine anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
That happens on every one of these.
Interesting.
That happens on every one, and this is another I've never told. When you get to that point, the signature's on, you walk away. It's not mine anymore.
Yeah.
I've given it to
Yeah. You've moved to the next in a way.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gone. I'm going on. So some people have said, and they mean it in a nice way. Oh my God, how do you handle the pride and the deal about all that? It's gone.
Yeah. Yeah. You've done what you're supposed to do.
And I've gone on. You don't bask. That's the correct word.
Right.
You don't bask in the glow from it.
Yeah.
You're often going somewhere
Well,
else.
I think that's being a professional. I think that's the difference between being an amateur artist and a professional. You're not going to hang that in your house. It's going to the next homes. You've done your job as an artist. You've done the most you can do. You're satisfied enough that you'll put your name on it, and now you're ready to achieve something
Probably
else.
that's yeah. Well, that just falls in line with this comment I've always had. The next one's going to be the best one.
Right.
That's
Right.
going to be. That's
Right.
I got one coming.
Yeah, and it might be. That's the funny
Hopefully
thing.
it will.
It
Hopefully
might
it
be.
will.
Yeah,
That's why
yeah.
looking back on what you've done is not the most positive thing you can do.
Yeah, I think that's very important for artists, especially artists who are listening to this, who may be getting going or whatever. That's a good point for them to try to shoot for. That you do the best you can. When you're finished, you sign your name, and then you move on to the next one and try to make it better.
Fred always says, an artist that starts collecting his own artwork will be broke soon.
He's right. Pretty much.
We have
he's
very
right.
little of our art in our home.
Yeah. No, well, but you have lots of art.
We do.
Other people's art,
Yeah.
because you appreciate art.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I think that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Deborah Fellows, oh my God, Deborah Copenhagen Fellows, or D. Copenhagen, as
Yes.
we should call you that for the early ones. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
thank you.
for-
It's been fun, Mark.
Yeah, no, everyone should come and listen to this podcast or watch it. They're going to get a lot out of it. I know I did. I learned a lot.
Well, you went to places I haven't exposed. And I knew when you asked me to do this would be different than all the rest.
Yeah. Well, it's more intimate for me. I want to
Obviously.
know. You know, it helps me understand you as a person, which is critical, but also the art.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's what I do for a living.
Cool.
Cool. Thank you. All right.
Thank you, Mark.
Art Dealer Diaries, Deborah Copenhagen Fellows. We all know D. Copenhagen Fellows. Deborah, you're just fantastic. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right. Man Gallery, located for over 26 years in Tucson, Arizona, specializing in antique Native American art, early Western art, including the famed Maynard Dixon, as well as modern art. You can find everything online at medicinemangallery.com. There's over 6,000 objects to select from. Also, the Charles Bloom Murder Mystery Series, written by yours truly, me, Mark Sublett. There's 6 books in this series, and they follow the protagonist Charles Bloom through all the intrigue of the art world set in Santa Fe and the Navajo Nation. These can be found on Audible, eBooks, Amazon, and of course, the gallery at medicinemangallery.com.